I've been taking a couple of notes. There was a X exchange several months ago or last year sometime between a British writer named Rory Stewart and J.D. Vance, and it was on the subject of immigration. And Rory Stewart is nominally a member of the British Conservative Party, but I think he's what we would call a Tory squish. And he's, like a lot of British conservatives, he's a liberal on immigration, like they've all become, to the chagrin of their own population. And, he was arguing with J.D. Vance on X over this subject. And J.D. Vance, I think rightly, went back to the principles that we've been discussing and said no. He started with obligations, the obligations of the Christian, and that the obligations start first. And he was pointing towards Catholic social teaching, as J.D. Vance is a convert to Catholicism. Your family comes first, and then your neighbors, and then your larger community after that, and so on and so forth, drawing concentric rings radiating outward from your own house. G.K. Chesterton's little platoons, as he called them, radiating ever outward from that central point. Therefore, do we have an obligation to treat an immigrant fairly and humanely? Yes, we do. But are they our first, as a society, as a policymaker for the United States of America? J.D. Vance was arguing, is that my first priority? No, it is not. I have to treat them humanely. I am called by God to treat them humanely. But their welfare is not my first priority. My first priority is to those who are closest to me. And I think, to the point that you were making, they're in the right ordering of things. And this is where we've gotten out of kilter with our leaders. And I think there are very real reasons for that. That flow back and forth between the goal of the Christian life and how that informs the policymaker are completely broken today. The liberal Democrat, and I made another note a moment ago about, I've often thought Protestants follow the Pauline epistles too closely, and they forget about the Beatitudes. And Catholics, in my experience, those four gospel writers, I'm not saying that Paul isn't a saint. Paul was certainly a saint, or is a saint to the Catholic. But those four gospel writers, they sort of hold a scriptural preeminence to the Catholic in the New Testament. A little bit of a prejudicial hierarchy of importance when the Catholic approaches the scriptures. Those four gospel writers, because they directly contain the direct words of Christ, and there were direct interactions between the gospel writers themselves as apostles and Christ in human form. And particularly, the Sermon on the Mount, they hold a little bit of preeminence. And I think the sides where the political parties do engage with Christian faith, there's some influence on the part of, a Catholic senator like Dick Durbin of Illinois. They're both kind of take their approach. The Protestant, the Southern Baptist governor of a southern state might really like the Pauline epistles in his church, and they quote from the letter to the Romans or the letter to the Corinthians incessantly. They completely forget, I think, often about the Sermon on the Mount, about Christ's words on what's taught in the four Gospels by the four Gospel writers. And they really like the Pauline epistles are kind of it. And the Catholic holds the Gospel writers in preeminence, and the Sermon on the Mount, and the meek shall inherit the earth, and blessed are the peacemakers. But then both of them then take those approaches and denude them of the fundamental underlying metaphysics of the entire story and turn it into a secular materialist mission on earth, which gets, I think, to one of the points that you were making, which is that then we forget about the right ordering of things by the policymaker, which is to help advance the journey of the people who elected you in their Christian walk of faith in peace and tranquility and salvation, towards salvation and holiness. And they turn it into a broader materialist mission of, which is, I think, dangerously close to the Marxist vision of bringing about heaven on earth.